right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Deep Thoughts. Today is one of those subjects I sort of don't want to do, but I feel like I just had this bug put in my brain when I was thinking about what to record today. And I was like, no, I got a better idea. I got to have a better idea. I got a whiskey stick. It's got to be about something about NASA for 2 hours. And the universe just keeps saying, nope, not going to happen. You're going to cover this particular subject because it's important. Obviously, you can see the title. It is called, What If You're Wrong? Now, if you could even make it to this video, there's a little trophy for you every step of the way. Instead of giving you ads, I'm just going to give you trophies along the way here. Because what we're going to talk about is the thing that no one ever talks about, which is the process of trying to prove something and then finding out you're wrong. Right? That's one huge disease that is covering the entire world right now. And it happens at the micro level. It happens at the macro level. It happens between you and yourself, right? You'll get pissed off in your own little walk in life because you were so sure it was one way and then you were wrong. And then you just kind of get pissed. And then when it becomes a publicly stated thing, you can get embarrassed and pissed, right? So I'm going to talk about this from several different angles. I am going to talk about the President of the United States as of 2017, because I think that this problem is tearing apart the country when it comes to him. What I find really interesting is if I take any human aside and I say, hey, what do you think about, you ever seen the movie, Minority Report? And some people say, yeah, wasn't that when they knew you were going to do a crime before you did it? And I was like, yeah, exactly. And if somebody says, I don't know what the hell it is, you explain it to them. And then you say, well, what would you think about that? What would you think about running the world like that? Or they could somehow run some software. They could have someone claim to be psychic. And then you just be guilty if this AI or this person said you were guilty. And then you could go away to prison for crimes that you are nowhere near committing. I would be really surprised if in a million interviews one person said, yeah, that'd be awesome. But that's what they're doing to Donald Trump. The people who are against him. I mean, they literally have said, I know you're going to commit crimes, or I know you're going to do a bad job. I know. And because this is such an emotional, irrational moment in American history, you have people that have never stepped into public and expressed a public opinion on their political choices or affiliations, and now they have stepped right into the spotlight with a thimble's worth of history. They have no knowledge of how the system works. They barely know how a bill is passed, and their only knowledge is that little cartoon back in the day, I'm just a bill. But they have looked up from their life, and they've been eating from the George Soros trough of complete disinformation. They're not smarter than Hillary Clinton, so they're unable to see the scam that she is, and they're not smarter than Bernie Sanders, or they've got grandpa issues, and they go there. We're going to get into other things other than politics, but I can't think of a better way than to illustrate how important this is. But they are accusing this guy, Donald Trump, of just infinite crimes and infinite, violations of liberty and all this stuff. And he's probably the most legitimate president we've had in ages in terms of not being a part of any secret society. I hate to burst your bubble, but, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama attended the Bilderberg meeting in 2008. Or I guess 7, technically. Well, the Bush family, my God, you couldn't get more embedded into the deep state shadow governments than that family. Bill Clinton went to the Bilderbergs. John Major went to the Bilderbergs. Tony Blair went to the Bilderbergs. Ronald Reagan never missed a Bohemian Grove party. Neither did Richard Nixon. Jimmy Carter, he might have been legit, but He wasn't a very imaginative bloke. Not a bad guy. LBJ belonged to the White Knights. And JFK grabbed him in the pussy. So what I do on this show is I grab an emotion, I grab a state, I grab an action, a change of state, whatever, and I slow it down, and I slow it down, and I go into the genetics of that moment so that we may understand ourselves a little bit better. Have you ever had a conversation with someone about the emotion of being wrong? I've had a lot of conversations. I've had some damn good conversations. Can't say I have. Can't say I have. It just happens. And we probably don't talk about it because who the fuck wants to talk about something that you don't like? That's not a pleasant experience if it's handled a certain way. Being wrong will piss you off for one of two reasons. Perhaps both, but usually one of two pretty specific reasons. One, you just need to be right because whatever you're doing is time-based and it just has to be finished. It's not even a personal issue on yourself. You're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube and you just want it solved and you can't figure out how to do it. And so you're just getting more pissed and more pissed that you can't figure it out. It's a horrible example, but take anything in your life where you're doing something mechanical. You're trying to find the peg that'll fit in the hole. Whatever. And it, sometimes it can fall over that slippery slope where your perception is that, it's all lost. Let's say you're taking apart something really sophisticated like a camera or something, and then you knock over the tray with all of the bits and pieces that were perfectly lined up so that you wouldn't forget where the bits and pieces are. Now it's all mixed up on the ground. You think, oh my God, there's no way. I don't have time to sort this shit out. It's probably not true. So there's the destination anger, the delay to your destination. That's the easiest one to deal with. But it might actually physically create the most angered response, the most physically outgoing response. The other one is the notion that you're wrong and that there's something inside you that is incapable of being right. And so you might feel that little feeling that you're broken inside. Broken can be categorized as you don't have enough intelligence or something. But are there moments when we're wrong and we don't shit ourselves? We don't have a huge problem with it. Now, some of you live your life like this all day long, so I'm preaching to you. For me, it's been a journey. It's been a journey of really not liking the process of being wrong as a youth, and then I'm not exactly sure where things have gotten a little bit better. I guess in my 30s somewhere. If you've ever engaged in a scientific experiment of any kind, and I want you to understand, I'm not talking about you dressing in a lab coat, going to a laboratory, and being officially endorsed as a scientist and having an experiment. I'm not talking about that at all. But you're in your backyard, you are in your living room, you're messing with some electronics, you're looking into an engine of a car, you're trying to fix a lawnmower. It doesn't matter. There's some sort of process that you're going through. And it's going to be a meticulous trial and error thing. And you know that you're not quite sure how to do it. But somehow, when you were going in to this issue, right? Let's say that the problem that you're trying to solve has a membrane around it. It's in the problem is directly in the center. And there's a membrane, and when you walk through that membrane, you're within the realm of the problem that you're trying to solve, right? The engine has a key that starts it. And so the key is inside the membrane. It's part of the solution, but the problem might be in the engine compartment. You know what I'm saying? I just want to get that in your brain. Let's say it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a breezy, beautiful 73 day like I'm at right now. And you got time. It's Saturday. The wife and kids gone, or the husband and the kids are gone, and they're happy as can be, and you just got some time to yourself. You got your tools. You have the things that you think you need to make this happen. You've looked up some YouTube videos. You've read some forum posts. You're going to fix something. And so you start. There's no pressure. You try a few things. Doesn't work. But you have a list of things on the internet that said it could be this, could be that, could be this, could be that. So you're trying something. I'm going to go with the car analogy because it's pretty simple. You're changing something. You start the key. It turns over, but it doesn't start. You fix something else. It doesn't turn over at all. Put that back. Now it turns over. You just keep the trial and error process going until you're finished. Until in that magic moment, a couple hours in, you flip the key, and not only does it turn on, but it purrs like it's never purred before. You not only got it to start, but it sounds better. And now you have a lot more information about the engine of your car. You know that you learned way more than you needed to learn to fix the one problem. Next time your car starts to act strange when you're driving down the Interstate 5 here in California, you're not so worried because you got some tools in the back. That one little thing comes loose, well, you'll tighten it up. That paradigm of trial and error and being wrong, technically speaking, is okay, right? Hey, I tried. And I knew that there were some parameters there. But what have we allowed to have happen to the society at large now? It used to be that you could have a bunch of issues that were sort of a la carte. Well, you might be right about this and wrong about that, and right and wrong and right. And it was all individually judged. And someone might say, oh, he or she is really good at these things, not so good at that, but almost unbelievable at this. And you would get judged based on individual things. In today's world, we have tribal alliances that within its allegiance contains some certification that you're right about everything or you're wrong about everything. What do I mean by that? Well, go to a Democratic national convention and then stand there with a rebel flag shirt on and say you're part of the Republican Party. Without saying a word, without someone asking you a question about your actual integrity and what you actually believe, they will see you in the other tribe, and in their brain, you were all wrong. And on their conservative side, you'll look at the chick with the where she's flipping off the crowd and howling like a wild beast. The feral social justice warrior. And there's nothing you can do besides throw her out with the bathwater, right? That kid's entire genetics look like it went completely wrong. Whatever parental guide that she was supposed to have never showed up to the party. And now she seems completely imprinted and immortalized in an act that would most likely put you in a funny farm 40 years ago. So that's the political spin. We'll come back. Now, you're going to hear me use flat earth and round earth time and time again because it helps illustrate points. I just did an episode on solutions yesterday. I'm going to try not to repeat myself. We're going to try to stick on the topic here. I'm going to try to stick on the topic. Which is, if you've dived off into this space program thread, rabbit hole on YouTube, on the internet, you've undoubtedly discovered that our space agencies are lying through their teeth. And today it is now extremely easy because we've done a tremendous amount of cross-referencing. Tens of millions of people are now cross-referencing their notes. The ISS has never filmed the moon in all of its history because it's a big prop where it lives. And so regardless if there's something in space, we ain't getting any video from it. But now if I tell you that everything that NASA, JPL, and all the other space agencies from the very beginning is wrong, it's a lie. I shouldn't say wrong, it's a lie. They are making assumptions. Perhaps they're trying to make assumptions that get it right. Perhaps they're making assumptions to deceive. You know, if the people that believe in firmament dome, disk, flat Earth are correct, then NASA would be heavily involved in a conspiracy, not just a money laundering agency for the military. So the implications of what they're doing go way beyond just wrong. It's utter scientific betrayal, right? But now let's say for a second, before you go off to an alternative belief system outside of NASA's 50, 60 years of bullshitting us, if somehow someone can convince you that everything that they've said is a lie, and they prove it to you, whatever you need to see, you see it. Well, what's really odd about that is it undoes the certainty of history in your life. What if someone could convince you that the history that you believed in your life wasn't really your history, that it never happened? For any of you that watch the movie Blade Runner, there's a point where Sean Young's character finds out she's a replicant. And she believes that she is real because someone gave her a photograph of her with her mother. And she can remember a bunch of stuff when she was young. And Harrison Ford's character, Deckard, recalls a couple memories for her. And he said, "Did you ever tell anybody that story?" And he says it was Terrell's niece's stories when she was young. They're implants. And Sean Young's character sits there, or stands there, and basically, disintegrates in his living room and leaves. Because she had her history erased. And that loss of orientation is something that probably most of us have never experienced. Now, I heard a story about Jack Nicholson, as a small digression, to give a real example of this. I heard a story that at 38 years old, Jack Nicholson discovered that his mother was his grandmother and that his aunt was his mother, something like that. Because I guess his mother had him really young. And back in those days, it was frowned upon to be outside the pocket of a family. So if you ever want to know why Jack Nicholson has such disdain for women, it's because he was betrayed by, potentially, if the story's true, he's betrayed by the two closest women in his life. Now, when they make those choices, they don't know if he's going to grow up mature or immature. Jack turned out to be an extremely mature individual who probably could have handled the story as a young person, but they didn't know. But why mention the whole thing about NASA and flat Earth? Well, here's the thing. Once you find yourself totally disoriented in your own life, there's an urgency to get oriented very quickly. And that's where the stakes go up when it comes to being wrong. If you believe you live on a round ball Earth, and then someone does a little photography test with you for a lighthouse that's potentially 45 miles away, and they use one of these new, the 900 Sony cameras, whatever they are, and you could zoom in on it and you say, look, it didn't curve away from us. It should be, 1,200 feet below the edge of the Earth over there. And even though there's supposedly some bending of light due to gravity, it ain't going to bend that much. And so right there in your face, they prove to you that what you've been told your whole life isn't true. And now you're at ground zero with a couple clues. That's it. Well, how fast do you try to figure out where the hell you are? And how disturbing would it be to go out there and find out that there are half a dozen theories outside of globe Earth? That even the flat disk, flat Earth people have several different flavors of what could be true if that were true. So at one point, being wrong isn't about getting ridiculed by other people. There's a flavor of being wrong that is simply between you and yourself. But here's what I'm going to try to instill in you guys throughout this episode, which is I want to take the sting out of the word wrong. And there are people that will, point their finger at you and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And they make you feel horrible. And you could be wrong. But it's one of those things when, I've had several friends of mine who are, I'll say black. They don't like being called African American, my friends. It's like they said in Do the Right Thing. I'm from Detroit, motherfucker. I'm not from Africa. But they said, the N-word has gone through all kinds of iterations of meaning. And they said that, in the 90s it was really demonized, and this is when the black community said, this is our word, you're not allowed to say it. Anyone else, you can't say it, it's our word. And my friends who are very intellectual and black, they said that was the worst thing that could ever happen. Because it took that word that basically meant nothing. It was used, it was used in the 40s, 50s, and 60s during segregation, and it had a meaning. But, we managed to cleanse it out in the 70s and 80s through movies like Blazing Saddles and, Richard Pryor getting up there and turning it into just an endearing reference. But my buddies, I have one friend of mine that lamented beautifully. And he just simply said he took it from being this sort of any one of the references you'd have for anyone else in the world. And, because he was in the military, and he said, the white guys would be called Polacks and da-da-da-da-da, and the Krauts and all these other things, but was always with a hug right after it and a smile and do the thing that you do that no one else does from your culture, that kind of thing. It was always an act of camaraderie. And he said it took it and turned it into this wedge, this red-hot poker wedge of utter offense. And then he goes, then they trained the black community to embed it in all the gangster rap, to embed it in all the comedy. And so it was being injected into society as a word that was funny in some cases, endearing in other cases, and then super negative in another case. And so we became completely disoriented, and this word gained so much power over everyone, but especially over the black communities, right? Being wrong, that word has different connotations to different people. Now, you're going to do things in your life that you're going to do seriously. You're going to do things not very serious because there's no urgency to be right. You're just messing around in your house, whatever. Then you'll do something wrong in both scenarios. One, you're desperately trying not to do anything wrong. Perhaps you're in a relationship, and every interaction you're having with someone, you're trying to make it just as wonderful as it possibly can. You'll still make a mistake. It's just natural, right? It's always intent that defines sin between men. If someone means to do you harm, they premeditate and act against you. That's what matters. Now, some people just lack intelligence on some basic levels, and they find themselves bumping into things a lot. They make mistakes a lot. They hurt people's feelings a lot or whatever. Some people are just sort of nervous and clumsy. And so what goes into the wrong bucket is vast. It has several species. But what if someone came up to you and said, I think you were really wrong about this? And your reply was simply the following. You said, well, at the time it looked like it was the right thing to do. At the time it looked like all the data pointed to that being the best solution for everyone. Or you say, well, I had two options. Neither one of them looked that appealing, but I didn't have a third. And I thought there was something wrong about both of them. So I did the one that was least wrong, that had the lightest implications of negativity towards other people. You just sort of took the steam out of the whole thing, right? It isn't a sin against man. It's not like you were out to fuck somebody over. Now, the only caveat to everything I'm saying here is that I am very lucky, right? I've got you guys. You guys are an incredibly qualified audience to talk to. You just are, especially if you've made it this far. What's beautiful about some of these episodes is by design, I have filtered out pretty much all the shallow people in the world, right? Because we're having a deep conversation. One, if you can look at an episode that's an hour long and click play, that speaks to your intellect. Two, if I start going off on these esoteric subjects and you stick in there, because overall there's a pattern of hopefully some value to these conversations. And again, even if you disagree with me completely, what you've done is you've affirmed what you believe, and that's got value in itself, right? But now that I have you, you know that there are people that are going to lack the ability to understand some of these higher concepts of wrong and right. Sometimes you could be, Billy D. Williams, and you're as smooth as ever, and you're explaining to them, look, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, right? I didn't know that was something that was going to set you off, right? And they just won't get it. They'll just go right back to the beginning. How could you? How could you? And they're just stuck in their own little loop, which means for them, they have now been hurt. And there's sort of a bucket of hurt in their chest, in their gut, in their soul. And by talking and being hurt and crying or whatever they want to do, hopefully not breaking anything, hopefully not getting in any scuffle with you, they're pouring the bucket out slowly. And they may need a couple hours. They may need a couple days to pour the bucket out. Some people, once they get injured, they not only have a full bucket of hatred out of sheer ignorance and understanding that other human beings are, flawed. We're all not perfect, okay? And so we're all going to make mistakes. But some people want to live in fairy tale lands because they watch too much TV and too many movies. They haven't engaged reality quite yet. And you got to be careful putting those people in your circles. You're not going to be able to live up to their expectations. And consequently, if you were to go inside their circle, they don't live up to their expectations either. However, they write themselves a blank check or don't pay attention. But let's start taking some of the sting out of being wrong, all right? Now, what I'm not trying to do is create a situation where you can willy-nilly do whatever the hell you want, hurt people however you want, hurt yourself even, and say, it's okay. I'm not trying to do that. We have to be very, especially in this time, we have to start being very understanding for those of us that can, right? I would say those of you watching. And just as an example of where it's extremely difficult to write that blank check and to be understanding is, let's take the political thing again. Let's say you're left or you're right, and you're watching the other side and you're watching them talk. And you're not looking at the intellectual ones that can break it down and find some common ground with you. You're talking to the ones that you're watching, the ones that, again, they're just being tribalists. They're being loyal they're being loyal basically on the level of a color allegiance. Red. I'm a red. You're a blue. I'm willing to bet every one of you have had at least the one moment in your life where you said, yeah, I know why they're that way. When I watched the protesters in, Portland, Oregon, a bunch of punks walking around with bandanas on their face because they're such badasses, and they were blocking public transit. And eventually a SWAT team came in and broke that shit up. But I'll tell you what, there's this one fucking asshole who was in that bunch that a second the cops turned the corner, this kid bolted, but he was the instigator. Funny how that happens, right? But you look at those kids, if you understand the bigger picture, I mean, you understand they're serving George Soros. You understand they're serving, globalism and the New World Order. You understand that they're just dumb. But you have to say, okay, what are their ages? Well, it's probably between 18 and 24, somewhere in there. It's the average age. And you don't know shit when you're that young, just like Milo says. You don't. Some of these kids don't have an inkling of what's going on. It takes decades to learn how the world works. And it takes courage and an open mind, right? But you look at them and you say, well, hopefully, God willing, they will learn what they need to learn. It's just like the segregation lines, protest lines that were around in the 60s when the first black kids went to a white school And there's that famous woman, they've done a documentary on her, I believe on the History Channel, where she yelled at this black girl. She might have even spit on her. I can't remember. But they interviewed her 40 years later or 30 years later, and she was like, I am so ashamed of my behavior. I was so indoctrinated by hatred and racism. And, she'll forever apologize for her behavior. And that's very powerful. That's something that she did probably when she was 20 years old. Scarred her for life. So, she made a huge mistake. Well, that could be the case with what's going on right now in America. Everyone who's doing the Minority Report judging might feel really embarrassed in 2 or 3 years. The first thing I want to put up there, and I mentioned just a minute ago, is when you think about being wrong or someone else being wrong. Because this is a dual therapy here, right? And what I'm talking about in this episode is easier said than done. I understand. But this is where we can engage in self-therapy if you suffer from any of this, right? I think this will improve your relationships with your friends, with your family, both your spouse and your children and your relatives. You want to look at intent. And then you want to look behind intent to the intelligence pool that created the intent or lack of intent. There are ways that you can kill a human being in this world, in the Western countries, and they will give you an amazing pass because it's, killing in the heat of passion. There was a famous story where a police officer came home to visit his wife in the middle of the day, and he can't find his wife, and for whatever reason, he was able to get to the bedroom door without them noticing, and he opens the door, and one of his fellow police officers, I think the way the story goes, was having sex with his wife. And within a split second, he drew his firearm and emptied it in both of them and killed both of them. And as I remember it, he didn't get much time in prison, if any, because they said it was a heat of the passion crime. He lost his fucking mind within that split second because he's a police officer, a law enforcement person who's got the right to carry a weapon on him all times. They gave him slack because he was legally carrying a weapon. And the jury was able to see, yeah, man, I'd probably do the same thing. Now that's an extreme example of a person losing their mind and doing something wrong. Obviously, after the guy was done firing his weapon, the regret of everything started to sink in milliseconds later. Sanity returned. And those are the hairs you have to split when you look at people that have done you wrong or at moments when you've lost your mind and done something chaotic. There's that old advice that says, don't do anything in the heat of passion, right? Don't react in a negative way, right? There's positive things you should go ahead and do all the time in the heat of passion. But when you're talking about some sort of crime or some sort of thing where it would offend someone really badly, you think you saw something in your relationship that was really bad and you react, and then you find out you didn't have all the information, and then you're wrong. But what we're going to do is create essentially a methodology that you can use to live your life. And when things go astray or not the way you planned, it won't hurt so damn bad. In fact, it might actually be sort of invigorating. The invigoration stems from sort of your Edison methodology where, the story is that he created 10,000 light bulbs that didn't work before he found the one that could stay on for a really long time. Now, a bunch of them lit up, but they burned out quickly, they popped, whatever. When he figured out how to put a vacuum inside the bulb, it really helped. You can manage your life like that as well. Every single thing that happens that doesn't go according to plan, that becomes another constraint in your life where you go, okay, that doesn't work. If you remember the old movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about a guy that goes to a town to film Groundhog Day celebrations, and for whatever reason, he keeps waking up in the same exact day, living the exact same life, and every time he goes to bed, he wakes back up. And so he ends up creating the perfect day by learning from every previous day what he should do. And he starts to, it's an amazing story about introspection. He learns about himself because he's sort of an angry guy when he gets there, and he's sort of really flippant with his life and couldn't give a crap, but he kind of has the hots for one of the reporters, this woman, and he tries to win her over, and he realizes he's just a jerk, and she has no attraction to him at all, but he only has 24 hours to win her over, and so he creates the perfect day. And once he creates the perfect day, he gets a chance to move on, and in the next day, it's not over. That is a brilliant example of a guy that's been wrong, I don't know what, 1,000,000 times? We don't know how many years he lived in that scenario. We don't get to redo our days. We have to continually move down this series of state changes, which we call time. So the faster we can master techniques of learning, literally a methodology, and yours is going to be different than mine, the better life we live. The mantra that you can give yourself and give others who you're really close to is simply say, look, I'm trying to do everything right, every moment of my life. I'm trying to get the most out of life. I'm trying to be a good person. And then if you have a relationship, you can say, I'm trying to be the best husband, the best father, the best employee, the best son, brother, sister, whatever, daughter. And I'm going to win some and I'm going to lose some. But when I lose, which is technically just finding out what I did wrong, I'm going to try to figure out how to do it right. And because life isn't 100% explained, right? There's no brochures that show up from God. Some things are going to take some time to figure out. I might need to make 9,999 light bulbs before I'm going to find the right one. But I'm going to keep picking myself back up off the ground anytime I'm wrong. I'm going to brush any blame off, any scarlet letter that I might have given myself or that others are trying to impose on me, and I'm going to push forward. And what does that statement do? That statement both works for you and it works for them. And that what you were saying is, look, sin is intent. It means that you intended on hurting someone. That's the true sin. Mistakenly hurting someone's feelings, well, you have to judge that, right? Now, ignorance is the other caveat off to the side. I'll bring back a story I told in season 1 to show you where I was incredibly wrong and just stupid. I came from Kansas, and even though the level of homosexuality that anyone knew about was almost at zero, there was the standard homophobic kind of phrases that would be said here and there. And I was I was spending a weekend in San Diego, and my girlfriend knew these people in San Diego, one guy that had the house and 2 other people that joined. And we're sitting in a car. We're going to go into San Diego and I think go to a club. And Kenny G came on the radio, and everyone in the car made fun of Kenny G music. And I jumped on the bandwagon in a different tense than I should have. I thought they were making fun of him because it's sort of wimpy music, right? And I used the fag word. I called him a fag. My girlfriend crushes my hand because she's holding my hand. And what I didn't realize was the guy sitting next to me to my right in the back seat, who owned the house that we're staying at, was gay. And he had heard it all, and he wasn't a sensitive, puppy dog or anything, thank God. And eventually it became apparent, and no one said anything. She didn't even lean over afterwards and said, he's gay, don't say that. She never said a word, which I think looking back is kind of strange. But eventually he started explaining some relationships he'd had with guys, and I was like, oh my God. This guy was great. He was a super nice guy. He was hosting us. And I had just said the F-bomb right there in the car. That was me being wrong, completely out of ignorance, carrying some, sentiments probably from the Midwest, mindset. You always fear what you don't, know anything about. So that's a youthful person being stupid. Now, thankfully, think about this for 1 second. The guy did not turn to me and said, "What the hell did you just say?" He didn't say a word. He wrote me a blank check for being stupid and young. Exactly like I need to write those kids a blank check in Portland, Oregon for blocking public transit in the name of God knows fucking what, right? But we're human, right? We're human. So depending on your level of maturity, think about it. You are going to either rise up and have a moment of hatred towards those people, whoever. Maybe that guy had a pinch of like hurt. He might have had a pinch of hate. But for whatever reason, he was able to not say anything. So his level of maturity was to my benefit, right? Now, there's an old saying. You see it in films a lot, where someone's wrong. They've made a mistake. And someone says, someone gets angry at them and says, what the hell is wrong with you? You know that this is something you're not supposed to do, but you continue doing it. And there's usually a couple reasons why they continue. One of the responses that works sometimes, it doesn't work other times, is someone will say, "I'm trying to do my best. I'm not trying to make a mistake, but for whatever reason I am." Now, you'll know that some people that manipulate, they're using that as a crutch. They're using that as an excuse to continue doing whatever the hell they want to do. I think that's actually pretty rare. Other times, the anxiety of failing, because we allow being wrong to build up as this huge intellectual snowball of chatter inside you. The nervousness of individuals gets greater and greater to the point where they don't have all the faculties of their brain to calculate things properly, to look at data properly, to even take in data properly, to get it right, because they are so concerned. They have a good memory. They relive every moment they've ever been chastised for getting something wrong. And no one has ever been able to engage them intellectually and say, "Okay, I know this has been rough for you. It doesn't matter," right? Forget all that stuff that you've ever experienced. Forget what everyone's ever said to you about not getting this right. Start from scratch in your brain. We love you. We want you to succeed. We're convinced you're going to succeed. Try to drain the pool of nervousness, because nervousness, it's a little devil. Nervousness is almost like some sort of static electricity that swims throughout your body, swims throughout your soul and your mind, and it's disruptive. Because let's face it, if you walked into your living room and somehow there was some sort of plasma ball hovering in your living room, or some electricity just zapping off of your coffee table towards all the other furniture, first you're going to be amazed, but the second thing you're going to do is go, where the hell is all this energy coming from? Lightning bolts and plasma takes a tremendous amount of source energy. Where's it coming from? Well, when it's inside you as an anxiety, some nervousness, some horrible feedback loop, your body is providing the energy to sustain that nervousness, to sustain the butterflies or whatever it is. And once you have this pollutant in your system that is your nerves, it is robbing your brain and the rest of your body from that exact level of energy. So if you had, a gigawatt going towards your nerves, then a gigawatt has now been removed from your body that could be used to analyze data better, to use your eyes, ears, and mouth and all those five senses better. So if you suffer from anxiety, and that's sort of a catalyst to getting things incorrect, let's go deal with just saying, what you really have to say. I'm going to use an F-bomb here. Is just fuck all that. You know? This is your body. This is your mind. You own it. Lock, stock, and barrel. It's the only thing you own is your body, right? And hence your mind. You deserve to police what's inside you 100%. You do. And so I want you to have that liberating moment where you can walk out in the sun and take a huge deep breath and go, fuck all you guys, right? I'm not going to allow anyone else's chastising of me, past, present, or future, to affect me. I own my mind. And that will return all that power directly to you so that you could do things truly at your best. But when you get something wrong, and again, it could be how to floss your teeth to how to converse with your spouse when they are really upset. It has nothing to do with you at all. But you know, when someone comes home and they're pissed off at work or life, and you step inside that arena, you know that it can attach to you, that they could arbitrarily pick out things that you've done in the past that have angered them, and just it starts to be whatever will empty that bucket. Like I said before, they need to just vent. I had a family member that would do that, and it just made the whole world acidic. It was really unfortunate. Luckily, that boils off with time, usually. But you do have the old saying, the grumpy old men. And men grow up and get older, and they lose a lot of their accolades. You know, they used to be bodybuilders, and now they're frail and they're wrinkly, and they can get cranky. They got aches and pains they didn't used to have, and they get cranky. It's just life, man. I'm going to share with you one of the gut reactions that was essentially programmed in me by my father. And he's not so much this way anymore, but when he was younger and he would make a mistake, get something wrong, or something wouldn't go his way, his reaction was very verbally violent towards the thing, not towards me. But he would say, God damn it, like that. And I think in his mind, that was a way to exhaust out of his system the frustration that the moment gave to him. But the true damage that it did was it took a moment and it catalyzed it to make it worse. A tiny little thing would go wrong. You know, for any of you who've tried to take apart a piece of electronics and you have to put the screws back and you drop the screw down inside the equipment. You're like, son of a bitch, it's all down inside. You know, you're trying to get it with the magnetic screwdriver. You have to lift the unit up and shake it and shake it and shake it, and it takes you 30 minutes to get a screw out. It's very frustrating. But it took me nearly 20 years to stop saying that exact same thing after something went wrong in my life, because that's what you said. I still do it to this day every once in a while, but man, I catch myself every single time, and I back up and I say something else. Or I think something else to cleanse myself of that reaction. The reason why I mentioned that example is that we have to watch how we react when we get something wrong. That's the first stage. Then you can look at how other people react to what you do wrong. Nowadays, when I get something wrong, I go, oh, well, at least that doesn't work, or that's one way it doesn't work. And I sort of laugh it off. I kind of treat my life like it's a laboratory, and I'm simply Edison. And I try something, it doesn't work, and I go, oh my gosh, that was ridiculous. I should have known better than that. That wouldn't have worked. And it keeps my day in a positive flow. It takes the sting out. Now, before we get into how to help other people realize that you're wrong, which is very important as well, I'm going to give you a little example in the software industry. In the software industry, if you haven't been involved, there's something called QA, quality assurance, and it's a group of people that bug test the software. They use it in every single conceivable and inconceivable way that's possible, trying to make sure that, you know, the screens work, they flow properly. Now, when I was young, I mean, I got into software professionally at 18. You know, my view on bugs was, let's not find any bugs, because that's really the goal. Go through a full regression test, every feature that the product has, and nothing comes up. But what my boss taught me was finding a bug is a great thing, because that means we've discovered something that went wrong. It increased the quality of the product, so on and so forth. And so instead of mourning the process of finding a bug, we celebrated the process of finding a bug, and it made every day that much more amazing. And as an engineer, when I got the bug reports, I was happy to get the bug reports. Oh, there's another thing. So one of the ways you can take the sting out of your own life is that if you're hopping into bed at night, you're disrobing, and you're thinking about your day, you're thinking, I fucked up that thing. Let's spin it a little differently. Spin it, well, tomorrow I get to wake up more perfect than I was today because I figured out something I'm doing wrong. And that's a really wonderful feeling if you let it be. Now let's talk about other people discovering that you're wrong. That's sort of the terror dome, to quote Public Enemy, of being wrong, right? Who wants to be wrong in the public eye? Let's count. 0. Nobody does. We've all seen politicians who get things wrong in the public eye. They've committed crimes, what have you. We've seen fake news reporters now get it wrong. They were told that Hillary was going to win because they faked a bunch of polls, and these people that need to have fiction as reality believed it. And so you've seen people in the public eye who have cameras pointed at them defend their belief systems, right? You've seen people shamelessly try to turn their mistakes into not mistakes by trying to put in a bunch of weird perspectives on things to convince you they didn't make a mistake, and therefore creating this faux impression that they are always right. And this happens in relationships too. We all do this, right? Because we don't want to be wrong. Usually, as a younger person, you follow that other formula, trying to be right all the time, because you're defending your inner image of yourself, right? Nobody wants to be broken. No one wants to be wrong, because wrong is always kind of subliminally connected to being ignorant or stupid, right? Stupid is something you do wrong constantly, and you know it never works, but you continue doing it anyway. Ignorance is you just had no idea, and it keeps going wrong for you. Apologizing is actually a very interesting process, right? Apologizing is typically only difficult for one reason. Because in apologizing, you have to admit to your inner core that you were wrong. And that's where it hurts the most, is right here in your chest. But a close second, a photo finish second for pain is letting anyone else in the world know that you're wrong. And the larger the audience, the more difficult it is to admit you're wrong. Because the tribal ejection algorithm hits you really hard. Am I going to be ejected from the tribe? These people that I love hanging out with, these people that I love their approval of me, am I going to lose their approval of me? Am I going to have a scarlet letter for the rest of my life or for a day? And so we tend to conceal. Now, I'll admit, this is a slippery slope I'm about to give you a method on. You don't want to engage it very often. But if you've made a mistake, and there's time between the moment you made the mistake and the time in which someone else would find out and potentially be hurt by that mistake, and within that envelope of time, you can undo the mistake. By all means, undo the mistake. Now, at that point, you've created a secret, a little envelope with the secret of that moment in time. And what's interesting about it is it's only going to hurt usually for that amount of time if it's a certain type of mistake, right? You know, if you are unfaithful to your spouse, that most likely will never sound good, no matter how many decades you wait to reveal that to your spouse. But if it's something to do with the birthday, something to do with something really minor or medium, you could undo it. And they don't have to experience it. And then you can wait a few decades and say, remember that time that the cake came in and it was chocolate. Well, you know what I did? But I ordered the vanilla that you hate, that you're allergic to or whatever, and I didn't realize it, and I blah blah blah. It's a horrible example, but you know what I mean. Something more benign that in your youth, perhaps you're married in your 20s, and everyone's super sensitive in their 20s, and so when you hit your 30s and 40s, it's no big deal when you look back and you can reveal that thing that happened. You can have a big giant laugh, and then you get to erase the whole moment. All those envelopes go into the fireplace and they burn up, right? There's this huge debate that is usually not debated, but you'll hear it when you hang out with older guys like me. And it goes something like this. How honest are you with your spouse? And there's nothing like a spousal relationship. There's nothing. And you know what I mean is a long-term relationship, whether or not you're married or not, it's all in that same camp, right? And when you're young and idealistic, I think that the notion is I'm going to be brutally honest constantly, not brutally honest, but you're going to be honest constantly about what's gone on in the day. And usually the intent is obviously as pure as the winter snow sort of thing. But in the end, you can create yourself a lot of havoc by taking the inner chamber of your thought process and constantly externalizing it to your partner. I want to give you permission in this conversation, if you haven't already done this. You have a domain that's inside your mind, and it is yours. You own it. It's one of the greatest gifts of whoever created us. And you have the ability to try things out inside your mind, and that's what it's for. And I'll give you a simple relationship example that's happened to a lot of you guys and gals. You're in a relationship, and you have a circle of friends. And, you eat, sleep, drink, everything with your spouse. With your partner, I should say. And, it looks great on the outside when people look at you two guys. You photograph well, you seem really happy. But, living with someone else is a challenge. It's a daily challenge, and that's the beauty of it, not the drawback of it. But you go to a party, and your buddy has a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or there's just a straggler that keeps showing up, a stag with no partner, and you look at them, and man, are you ever attracted to that person? For whatever reason, the party goes on or your events go on, you always find yourself in a little private conversation with that person. And whether or not they're aware, you have attraction to them. And you start to look at your situation, and you start to look at this person, and you realize you have this illusion that they get you more than your spouse does. But the one thing that's never happened is you've never lived with that person, and they've never lived with you. You have no idea if the way that you sleep in bed is the way they hate to spend the night with another person. You move too much, whatever. You may not know, but your favorite food is their food they hate. You don't know it, but they have 22 cats at home, but they're not talking about it. And so you covet someone else's spouse, or you start to become sort of what you believe to be unfaithful in your mind towards another human being. And so you feel like you're being sinful. You're not being loyal to the person that you've committed yourself to. Because inside your mind, you're playing out certain scenarios with limited information, right? You don't have all the information in your head. Now, I'm going to give you a little piece of wisdom from your uncle on Deep Thoughts. And I know some of you are older than me, so you're laughing your head off. You might go a decade in that situation. Maybe you disconnect from the group of friends because you move or whatever. But one of the things I've seen several times is you get reintroduced to the person that you had such an affinity for. And what they evolved into in 10 years is something that didn't attract you at all. Whatever it is, they gained 200 pounds, whatever, they just became a weird person. And then you look at your partner that you kept for those 10 years and you go, wow, I lucked out. I was infatuated with this person over here for however many months, maybe a year. But man, in the end, I picked the right person. I was lucky that I stayed loyal. The angels were looking out for me, right? But now, what if you had gone home to your spouse and your partner and you said, oh my gosh, I just want you to know I'm really attracted to this person. It doesn't mean anything, da 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 da. And either they're really mature and they go, yeah, she is cute. I can kind of see why you guys would be attracted to each other. And you go on with your dinner. You go on with your life and everything's fine. You've been able to be honest and purge that sort of guilty pleasure out of your brain, and it's okay. But what if they don't have the wisdom at that point in their life to deal with what you just said? Boom. Explosion. Potentially you lose the relationship that you're in. Maybe you cross over and you get rid of your partner and you go for that other person and you go to their house and you've already burned the bridge with your ex, and now you find out all those things that I warned you about. I'm giving you that digression because the more that I listen to the wise men around me that are potentially 10 plus years older than me, who've had very successful marriages especially, they will tell you that you don't walk around an open book with your subconscious, with your thoughts. That is your domain to study. And even when you think you've concluded something in your brain, you've thought about it long enough and you've concluded, give yourself a little bit more time to make sure that you can maintain that opinion over time, because you still might be wrong. Now, I'm going to throw this digression into this particular episode because I think we've kind of migrated the thought process to this point. I thought about doing I've thought about doing an episode on relationships. But again, who the hell is qualified to do that? I don't know that anyone is, because we're all different. And advice for one person is not going to work for other people. But there's an interesting mezzanine in the world when it comes to being wrong about the person that you've selected to be a partner in your life. And Hollywood and television does absolutely no good in this particular situation, if I may make a horrible sentence there. Magazines that try to steer you in the right direction for the right partner, little quizzes of 10 questions to find out if you're with the right person. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to any of this shit, which is why I don't think anyone can really make a decent pitch of recommendation towards relationships. Do you think that a relationship counselor ever hears the same scenarios over and over and over? Not really if you get down to the details, right? But being wrong about picking your partner is one of the things that gets exacerbated by pop culture. And it all boils down to one little statement in your brain. And that is, can I do better? Have I found the best person in the world for me? Now, some of you will be able to instantly answer the question. You'll say, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say for you, I would do nothing to shatter that opinion whatsoever. What that means to me, if you can say that especially over 10, 20 years, is that whatever standards you have for another human being, your partner meets those standards 100%. And even though someone else might have higher standards or some elements and attributes that they want to see in a person that your partner doesn't have, you don't have that. They provide everything that you need. At that point, do whatever you can to provide their needs, of course. But if you made it 20 years, you're probably on the right track, right? But there are marriages that have fallen apart after 20 years. But one of the deadliest things I've ever seen is that question destroying a marriage. Because it could be that someone has 20 years of bliss, and then they talk to the serpent in the tree, which is a movie, a television show, they read a magazine article, they talk to some friend who doesn't like their life, and so they're trying to destroy everyone else's life so everyone can be unhappy with them. It used to be back in the 80s especially that the hairdressers were always shit starters. Women would go off to get their hair cut, worked on, and it would take, a couple hours to do, and they're always chit-chatting about their relationships. And these women just want to see chaos. They want to see drama. And so they will try to steer you in a way that will destroy your life. And I've seen it so many times. That sounds silly, but it's absolutely the truth. Someone should write a movie about that. But the fact is, if you really want to split atoms and split hairs, we don't always find the most perfect person. But that's not the game. The game is not to prove to somebody or prove to your creator or prove to yourself that you have found the most ideal, perfect human being. Does that mean you should marry the first person you date? No. This universe is riddled with challenge, is it not? Is there anyone who's ever won everything that they've ever competed in from birth to death, and they lived a nice, long 80-plus years of life? I don't think so. Even people that did really well in their early years run into challenges eventually. Who would have ever thought that Steven Spielberg would have had a problem financing a movie? Who would have ever thought George Lucas would have ever had a problem with his life, ever? When they succeeded at young ages and they set utterly a cultural precedence for every movie that they made. But they all ran into problems. And it is our ability to deal with challenge that makes us stronger, that makes us a better human being. And that's what being wrong is all about. Being wrong is just the beginning of the growth process. Reacting to it in a way that keeps your life constructive, where you go, gosh, I found a bug, Okay, let's go try to figure out what made the bug happen. When you're an engineer, I have spent, countless times. I have spent 4 to 7 days chasing one bug in software. One bug that when you look at the bug on the screen, it's like, oh, is it really that hard to find that bug? And you're like, yeah, there's 60 million lines of code. And that one feature relies on, 200,000 lines of code to get to that point. Yeah, it's a tough bug to find. And life could be exponentially more complicated than a bug in software. I know that every single one of you that's probably lived to about 40 and you've had more than maybe like half a dozen relationships, you've had those relationships that were very hard. And for some reason, those were the most attractive ones that you've ever had. I've dated people that threw themselves at me, right? I know all of you have had that, and so I'm not trying to brag or anything, right? But you just have that person that loves you so goddamn much and so unconditionally from the very beginning that you're worried that they're not seeing you for who you are because in your mind, you're not perfect. I've ended those relationships within weeks because I was like, whoa, you need to chill out because I am not what you think I am. I mean, at least in my own mind, I need you to see some of my frailties, some of my weaknesses, because then I know that, 10 years from now or 2 years from now, you're not going to suddenly bump into those things and say, I thought you were this way, but you're not, and I'm out of here. Now, when you get older, that actually kind of undoes itself a little bit, but that's why we're attracted sometimes to the things that aren't so easy, because at least it's lucid, it's real. Now, I promised I'd talk about apologies, and I didn't really get into it, so let me finish up on apologies here. When there is no way to avoid the realization of a mistake to another person, an apology can be the most powerful bonding moment that you have with another human being. Your spouse and your children are the two most important places that you can do that. But now, if you made a mistake, there was a chain of events in your life that led up to the mistake. And if you just walk in and say you're sorry for the mistake, all as just some final product, sometimes the person will understand and sometimes they won't understand. It's important that you, in your apology, sort of build up where you got it wrong. What was the systemic thought or action that you did, that you were a part of, that manifested and snowballed into the ultimate mistake that obviously you made against another person. Now again, if there's a way for you to keep that mistake completely out of their eye for the rest of their life, you don't actually have to admit it, but you can learn from it, then just thank your lucky stars and put a huge smile on your face that you're not going to have to reveal this one and have a great time with those people. But if it's something that's inevitable, that's going to come out and you're going to have to say something about it, just be genuine. If you're a parent, then your child wants your love anyway, right? If you're a spouse, they want your love. So it's important that that's the theme of your apology. Look, I made a huge mistake. I didn't realize I was making it because this happened and that happened, and I got totally confused. And boom. I guess I have to put addictions into this as well, because that thrusts us into the worst versions of ourselves eventually, right? One of the times that I got my ass beat, well, it wasn't really beat, but definitely got a fucking smack, boy. My old man had the wrong information. My aunt had told him the wrong stuff about my cousin and I disappeared, and he was grounded to be at home, and I wasn't grounded, which was the weird thing. But he was struggling with school at one point, and we went to my grandmother's house and stayed with her, and she helped him with the homework, and I just did my homework in the other room. And so we came home thinking that we had taken the responsibility for an academic problem. We had stayed with adults, that we didn't go off and mess around. And I think we had thought that we had notified our parents. But back in those days, you didn't have voicemail and you didn't have cell phones and text messages and stuff to help out the process, right? Could have been, where the fuck are you? I'm over at so-and-so's grandmother, and let's do this. But we came home, and the parents were all in his parents' kitchen. And again, we're walking in feeling euphoric that we had just owned our own problems, that we didn't have to have adults own the problems. And his parents are yelling and screaming. And the stupid thing was, we didn't clarify fast enough verbally before everyone started taking action, right? And so my dad's really pissed off that I helped my cousin supposedly not, come home and be grounded. And we're walking home, and I'm only 2 houses away from my house, from my cousin's house, and my dad, he's a big motherfucker, and he hits me really hard on my back, which is his little technique of giving you a little bit of pain, but it's going to not leave a mark, and it's just like one of these things of like Shape Up Kid. Or maybe he did it at the house or something, but I'm walking home, and he's walking behind me, and I'm pissed. And it's been the very first time that my dad ever disciplined me. It's the last time he ever disciplined me in my life. And I don't talk back to my old man because he'll just bring on more, right? And he was very good with his discipline. I mean, he usually got everything correct, got his information. But this particular time, he got shafted and he got emotional, and he had worked a long day, and he had to come home to this bullshit that was synthesized out of nothing. And I'm walking home, and I'm yelling at him. He's behind me, and I'm just yelling at him that we did what we were supposed to do. We did our homework. We didn't break any rules, and, this is bullshit, that kind of thing, right? And I get into my room, and I slam my door, which in any other circumstance, if I'd slammed my door pouting, my father would have knocked it off the fucking hinges and beat my ass, right? Rightfully so. This particular time, he was wrong. And he's realizing behind me, he's probably in his 40s, mid-40s, and he's walking behind me realizing he fucked up. But he's a man's man. He's sort of like, the Fonz. Saying sorry I'd never heard him say it before. So I kind of sit on my bed, and I'm so fucking pissed. I'm probably like 15 years old, and I'm sort of choking back my tears of anger. I'm so fucking pissed. And because he's hit me before he got my side of the story. I think that's what pissed me off the most, right? And it took about, 5 minutes or something, probably less than that. And he opens the door, carefully, and he comes up, and he sits next to me, and he hugs me, and he says he's sorry. And I think at that moment he grew 20 years in maturity, And now looking back, being older than he was at the time, or, similar age, it was a big moment for the both of us. And, he never did it again. If he got angry, he definitely got his information ahead of time, but there was no more, physical discipline. But him saying he was sorry sort of mended everything, as much as I was still pissed off, right? So just understand that being wrong has an ecosystem to it, right? It has a beginning, middle, and end to every event. Now it would be naive if I didn't mention addiction that causes people to make problems for themselves, right? Addiction is a tough one, right? If addiction is leading to being wrong, then that is a really tough nut to crack. And what I'm going to say to you personally is the only person that can fix addiction is you if you have the addiction. If you are someone who is victimized by someone else's addiction, it's going to be rough. And that usually is where we enter the realm of potentially not being able to fix the problem in enough time to fix the relationship. Now, parent-child, it's a little bit different. You're in for the whole ride, baby. But when it's a spousal situation and they offer divorce, it's really tough, isn't it? Addiction usually matters when it hurts other people. If you're an alcoholic and you're constantly sabotaging events with people, I've had my share of, alcoholics sabotaging my birthdays. I'm not a person that really gives a shit about my birthday at all. I don't really give a shit about any holiday, quite frankly. If little kids are involved, it's different, but from adult to adult, whatever. But I've had to drag, I've actually had a girlfriend of mine that had to be dragged across the street. Couldn't walk. Was being dragged out by two of her friends because I was joining another birthday party of someone else, and she just kept drinking and drinking and drinking. And I put her in my car, and we're driving home. And everything's quiet till about 15 minutes before the exit to get home. And all of a sudden, just the verbal assault came out of this person like a demon had possessed them. And the next day, they don't remember saying anything, of course, right? Which, again, a lot of us have different philosophies on whether or not that's true. If you have an addiction that's constantly requiring an apology, you have to go with Tony Robbins' technique and simply say, the addiction is supposedly attached to something that makes you feel wonderful. That's the only reason why we get addicted to it, whether it be drugs, sex, or spending money, gambling, all that kind of stuff. But if it's constantly yielding a painful circumstance, and especially a painful retrospect as to who you are as a human being, when you have to apologize for it, like, man, I'm fucked up, I'm addicted to this thing. All I can say is you have to take every addiction separately. What'll fix drug addiction won't fix gambling necessarily, won't fix sex addiction or whatever. But you're going to have to dig yourself out of that personally. And I'm probably not the source of knowledge for how to do that because I don't really have much of an addictive personality. My technique, if I get addicted to anything, especially if it's not harmful to anyone else, it's just harmful to me, basically wasting my time doing something. For instance, if I, like a low-hanging fruit for guys is if you ever get into video games, you can get addicted to a particular video game, and the games are made to last for months and months and months, right? Sometimes the best thing to do is to cordon off 8-10 hours and play that game until you get utterly nauseated by seeing its icon. Now, you can't do that with drugs. You can't do that with sex. You can't do it in certain realms, right? You can't do it with infidelity. What you're going to have to do is figure out who you love more or what you love more, right? And then try to attach the pain to the addiction instead of the pain to the apology, right? Take all that pain from your apologies and being wrong and attach it to the thing. So every time you jump into that loop of addiction, that the pain comes back to you immediately and you go, Jesus, why would I do this? It just destroys my life. So I think you feel me. This episode's getting long. Hopefully this has some value to you. Again, I think this is something that we don't talk about. You don't get advice on it. If you do get advice, usually paying someone by the hour. And depending on the length of their career listening to you, they may either have no life experience to really engage you on a solution, and they're just paying, you're just paying them to listen to you. So I hope you feel me. I guess about all I got on that one. What if you're wrong? It's okay. Just apply these techniques and hopefully it'll relieve you a little bit. DeepThoughtsRadio.com for all the sources. Again, if you're coming through video, there's a podcast. If you're coming through podcast, there's a video. Whatever floats your boat. I try to keep the podcast up to date. Someone asked me why the podcast gets behind the video sometimes. All I will say is that I try to get the video as part of the podcast feed on the mkultraradio.com site that hosts the podcast. And I have to wait for it to encode. And I like to wait for it to encode all the way up to 1080p before I release it. And then sometimes life gets busy and I don't go into the WordPress and put the article in. That's the only reason why it's behind every once in a while. So apologies. I'm glad you guys are digging the show. Subscriptions are moving up steadily, so it's really cool. Appreciate all you guys. Hopefully this doesn't offend anybody. If it does, go see my episode on being offended. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.